Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to join this informational webinar hosted by the Freedom Foundation to help educate teachers around the country about alternatives to traditional union membership and representation through groups like the National Education Association or the American Federation of Teachers. We are excited that you have interest in this issue and are interested in learning a little bit more and spending some time with us tonight. Hopefully you find the information useful and practical and might be something worth, might give you something worth pursuing or considering in your own workplace or for your own individual situation. My name is Max Nelson. I'll be the host of the webinar this evening. I've been the Director of Labor Policy at the Freedom Foundation here for 8 years, a little over 8 years now. And I served for about a year and a half part-time in the Federal Labor Relations Authority. So labor issues, something I'm passionate about. I've had the opportunity and the privilege to work with thousands of workers over the years, primarily public employees, helping them understand, learn about, and exercise their rights when it comes to union representation, union membership, and union dues payment. The Freedom Foundation, as an organization, is a 30-year-old nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We are headquartered here in our Olympia, Washington office, though we have a growing number of regional offices around the country, so far including California, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Oregon, and we continue to expand the scope of our work. The Freedom Foundation's mission that guides the work that we do and the projects that we undertake is to promote individual liberty, free enterprise, and limited accountable government. Now, as part of that, we firmly and proudly believe that workers should have the freedom to make decisions about union membership and representation that make sense for them. And that applies whether you're a public sector employee, teacher, state worker, or a private sector employee. And the purpose of this evening's webinar is to help you as public school teachers better understand some rights and options that you may not have known about and might want to learn a little bit more about. Before we get too far along, though, a couple of housekeeping items up front. If you have any questions or comments during the webinar, please submit them during the chat function at any time. We do have staff here who are working as hard as possible to answer as many of these questions as we get tonight. And we'll try to cover some of the more frequently asked questions at the end of the presentation. If you have a question that we don't have the time to address either through the webinar presentation or our staff answering questions through the chat, please feel free to just include in your chat question to us your email or phone number or some way for us to respond to you along with your comment and your question, and we'll do our best to go back through the questions that we receive over the next few days and try to get back to you with an individualized response. Now, to move on to our regular program, the webinar this evening will address three primary topics. First off, I'm going to discuss what a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision means for teachers' ability to make their own decisions about union membership. After that, we'll hear from Shanna Morgeson and Lonnie of the Association of American Educators about alternatives to union membership and union-offered professional liability insurance. And finally, at the end of the presentation, we'll discuss how teachers can form and maintain local independent unions in their workplace without having to affiliate with and pay dues to, again, the large national unions like the NEA or the AFT. Now, to begin with the first point, prior to 2018, many state laws required that public employees pay union dues or fees as a condition of employment. And of course, this included teachers. However, the Janus versus AFSCME decision issued by the U.S. Supreme Court in June 2018 concluded that forcing government employees, including teachers and other public school employees, but also firefighters, state workers, municipal employees, and so forth, that requiring any public employee to financially support a private organization like a labor union violates the First Amendment. And so the court struck down those state laws that previously permitted public employees to be compelled to pay union dues or fees as a condition of keeping their jobs. Some folks that maybe have been in the profession for a while who worked in states where this was required prior to 2018 may have been familiar. You maybe have heard about some of the options that were available to employees at the time, like paying an amount equivalent to union dues to a charity, things of that nature. That's off the table now. As a result of the Janus decision, all public employees can choose whether to sign up for union membership and pay full dues, or to refrain from union membership without any financial obligation to the union whatsoever. It's important to note that not only did the court strike down mandatory compelled dues payment as unconstitutional, but the court took an extra step, which was very important for protecting public employees' rights. And the court recognized in its decision that unions and public employers can only collect dues from a public employee's paycheck. They can only withhold that money from your wages if the employee affirmatively authorizes the deductions. So if you have never signed up for union membership, there should be no union dues withheld from your wages whatsoever. And if you don't sign up in the future, there should be no union dues withheld from your wages whatsoever. The unions and public employers need to get voluntary affirmative consent from employees before those deductions are permissible. And part of that means that the union and the employer should not be taking your money if you haven't knowingly waived your First Amendment right not to pay. In other words, you should be informed by either the union or the employer that you have a First Amendment right not to pay. And if you are not made aware of that right, and if you have not voluntarily agreed to pay, then arguably those dues deductions are not legally appropriate under the Janus versus AFSCME decision. So that's in a nutshell what the decision means. And as a result, teachers now, public school teachers now have a decision to make that in many states and in many cases they didn't have before. And that's whether it makes sense for you as an individual to join in as a member of your local union and pay the dues associated with that. Now, to help give you a little bit of background information, or at least get you thinking about some of these issues, I wanted to talk through how teachers' unions are structured, at least the two primary ones that exist in the United States. But before we get too far into that, I think it's important to note at the outset that we tend to think commonly of unions as being in a different category than businesses or other types of service providers. And that's really the wrong framework, I think, for understanding how unions operate. Fundamentally, unions are businesses, just like any other. They have a financial interest in bringing in revenue and doing that through the dues that they collect in exchange for a service that they provide, workplace representation. So I think it's just important that we have that mindset. Oftentimes the marketing doesn't quite match up with that reality, but really when you get right down to brass tacks, the behavior of unions is that of a business. They want to maximize income, maximize revenue through dues in exchange for services that they provide. But prior to the Janus decision, and as a result of enduring laws and legal privileges, unions haven't had to compete too hard, at least again in many states and in many cases. Unions representing public employees haven't had to really earn the business of their consumers, of their members, if you will. And that is starting to change as a result of the Janus decision. So with that, there are two primary unions that represent public school teachers: the National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers. Now, your local union may go by a name that doesn't have those words in the exact title, but odds are your local union that you know and you pay dues to is affiliated with at least one or the other or both of those two organizations. Now, in some states, teachers' unions at the local level prefer to refer to themselves as associations or use terminology that avoids the word union. But it's important to note that those entities are still affiliated with and financially support the NEA and or the AFT. And both of these two major unions are structured very similarly. Both have what's called a unified dues structure, which means that you are paying dues, you as an individual employee of school district in Texas or Kansas or Illinois, you're paying your dues to your local union, but that money is then being divided among several levels of NEA or AFT affiliates. So at the bottom level are the local unions. Typically in the school context, there'd be one per district. Now these locals will vary greatly in size and structure depending on the size of the district itself and the number of teachers involved. Larger locals, in major metropolitan areas may have multiple full-time staff and a physical office. Smaller locals might be run entirely by volunteers. But it's the local union that typically handles most of the day-to-day functions of a union, like engaging in contract negotiations, handling grievance representation, and other matters day-to-day that play out in the workplace. Now, above the local level, there's often a regional affiliate of some kind. The NEA would call this a uniserv, and that is also typically operated by paid union staff at that point. And again, just like the locals, the size and the composition can vary somewhat. Now, above the local and any regional entity is going to be a statewide union affiliate, again, in the vast majority of cases. And by the time you get up to the statewide level, you're almost always talking about a physical office with a number of full-time staff that are running and working out of that office. And then finally, above the local, the regional, the state, you'll have the headquarters office of the national union. And both NEA and AFT have their national headquarters offices located in Washington, D.C. Those are very large offices staffed with several hundred full-time employees. Now, the dues that teachers pay, though they're collected by the local union, they get allocated among the local, the regional, the state, and the national union. So a portion of those dues gets directed to each one of those levels of the union hierarchy. And it's not uncommon for the local union, which does much of the heavy lifting in terms of providing services, to keep less than half of the dues that teachers pay and that it collects. And the higher up the bureaucracy in the union you go, the less of that money tends to get used on activity that benefits your specific workplace. And by the time you reach the national level, the national NEA and AFT affiliates expend a great deal of energy and resources on matters unrelated to your school district. The NEA, for example, has had annual revenue in 2020 of over $600 million. About 70 million of that was spent just on staff salaries of the national NEA headquarters. The president, NEA president at the time, Lily Eskelsen Garcia, was paid $416,000 that year. Becky Pringle is the current president, but that hasn't been reflected on any of the financial reports yet, the annual financial reports that the union will file with the Department of Labor. So that's the most current information that's publicly available. The National Union's Secretary-Treasurer, Princess Moss, was paid $396,000 in 2020. The Vice President, Rebecca Pringle, was paid $361,000. NEA at the national level spent $51 million on political activities and lobbying, according to its annual financial reports, and nearly $120 million was spent by the NEA headquarters on contributions, gifts, and grants, a lot of which went to organizations with a strong ideological bent, some very controversial, some that are advocating for things like defunding the police and so on. The AFT at the national level, very similar. They reported over $253 million in revenue in 2020, fiscal year 2020. About $44 million of that was spent on salaries for its officials. The president, Randy Weingarten, was paid $453,000 that year. The National Secretary-Treasurer, Loretta Johnson, was paid $323,000 that year. AFT national headquarters spent $31.2 million on political activities and lobbying, and $8.5 million on contributions, gifts, and grants to various organizations. Now, one point that I think it's important to make, just as a side note when we're talking about the national unions, Uh, Oftentimes, unions will claim at the local level to their membership that members' dues are not used to make political contributions. And this may or not be correct at the local level. Certain state laws on the subject of union dues that are being used for politics will vary. In my home state of Washington State, it is perfectly legal for unions to expend dues money collected from their members to make political contributions. That is perfectly legal. It's not that way in all states, and the practices do vary from one union to another. But when you talk about the NEA and the AFT national headquarters, it is absolutely the case that some of the money that they receive from union dues paid by all of their members around the country does get set aside and spent on political activity. Now, oftentimes, again, when unions are trying to answer this question, they'll point out correctly that federal law prohibits them from spending money on or giving money, direct dues money directly to candidates for federal office, people running for president or the U.S. Senate or the U.S. Congress. And that is correct. Federal law provides that any contributions that an organization like a union wants to make to a campaign for a federal candidate, that money has to be raised from voluntary contributions. And so the NEA and the AFT both have federally registered political funds that rely entirely on contributions from their members around the country. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The NEA has the Fund for Children in Public Education that is funded by, again, voluntary contributions from members. The AFT has a Committee on Political Education, or COPE, structured very much the same way. But what the unions often will not say is that that categorical ban just applies at the federal level. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of states that do permit union dues to be spent on political contributions to candidates for state and local office, for governor, for state legislature, for school board, you name it. And both the NEA and the AFT at the national level maintain political funds that are dedicated to spending dues money, part of the dues money that the national unions collect, on political activity and political contributions in the states where they are permitted to do so. So just to compare the two, the NEA's Fund for Children in Public Education, voluntarily funded, raised $6.4 million in the 2019 through 2020 election cycle. That's a lot of money. But the NEA Advocacy Fund, which is funded by dues, received $25.2 million during the 2019 and 2020 election cycle. Similarly, AFT, the Committee on Political Education, raised $14.8 million in the 2019-20 election cycle from voluntary contributions, a lot of money. But the AFT Solidarity Fund, which is dues funded, received $25 million during that same cycle. So it is true, it is absolutely true that any member of NEA or AFT or any member of an affiliate of NEA or AFT, part of your money is going to the national headquarters of that union, and part of that money is being set aside for explicitly political activity. And that's not a point that either union likes to admit. But that is, in fact, the case. Now, more money may be getting set aside by your statewide NEA affiliate or AFT affiliate, maybe by your local. That, of course, that's going to vary, from one local union or state union to the next, and of course, state laws on this subject vary. But at least the national unions are going to be spending some of the dues that members pay on explicit political activity. Now, you have this right to resign your membership. Of course, some people are going to make the decision that membership in one of these two organizations is right for them, and that's perfectly fine. But if you are concerned about either of these organizations and you want to resign your membership and cease financially supporting them, you can visit optouttoday.com. That's OPTOUT today.com. And that's a designated website that the Freedom Foundation has put together where you can go look up for your specific union a dues cancellation request form and download it from the website. You'll need to print it off, sign it, and then mail it via certified mail to the address on the form, that is customized for each union. You shouldn't necessarily have to send it certified mail, but that's a good practice, a best practice to help make sure that that form is processed and honored and that you have proof that it was delivered. Now, state laws and union practices about how they handle dues cancellation may vary, but at the end of the day, this is your constitutional right. And if you run into any difficulties with your union, please feel free to contact the Freedom Foundation through the optouttoday.com website for assistance, and we will follow up and do the best that we can to help you get your dues cancellation honored and processed. Now, what changes if you resign your union membership? It's a question that obviously is very relevant to people that we get quite a bit. And here's the rule of thumb. You will, again, as a general matter, you will retain access to anything that is governed by the collective bargaining agreement between your employer and the union, and anything that's employer provided. So your wages are not going to change. Any employer provided benefits, health insurance, retirement benefits, you're still going to be eligible for that. It's still going to be at the same rate. Any working conditions that are spelled out in the collective bargaining agreement, those should not change either. And so that's the general idea. If the employer is providing it, if it's covered by a collective bargaining agreement, you will continue to have access to it as a non-member of whatever your local union is. Now, the flip side is what you will generally lose the ability to participate in internal union affairs. So that would be things like voting in union elections, participating on the bargaining team, attending union-sponsored events, things of that nature. And you would also lose access to members-only benefits, discounts that the union may have arranged for its members to receive from certain businesses or vendors, and things like that, but not generally workplace-specific, employer-provided benefits. Again, those you will generally be able to retain. Now, one specific question that we often get from teachers involves, what happens if I lose, if I resign my NEA or AFT membership, and I lose access to the union's professional liability insurance policy. Is that something I should be concerned about? How does that work? And of course, yes, professional liability insurance through AFT or NEA, that is a members-only benefit, and you will not have access to those policies as a non-member. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to get similar coverage at the same or lower cost. Some states or school districts actually provide liability insurance to their teachers as a workplace benefit. And so you may not need to have a separate, private additional liability insurance policy if your state or if your school district has provided for you to have coverage anyway. But that's something that I would recommend that you speak to your human resources department about and get a better sense of, because again, that is going to vary across the country. In the event that you decide you are interested in purchasing supplemental, professional liability insurance, there are non-union alternatives that are available at a cost that is much lower than you will be paying in union dues. The NEA policy, I think the average full-time teacher probably pays about $1,000 a year in union dues. That's going to vary quite a bit from one place to the next. Some places it's less, some places it's quite a bit more. But the component of your membership dues that covers the liability insurance benefit is very minimal. It's only a few dollars a month cost to the NEA or the AFT to provide that liability insurance benefit. So if the only reason you're paying $1,000 a year or more in dues is to get a liability insurance policy that costs only a couple dollars per month, that's probably not the best use of your resources. Now, probably the largest and best known alternative source of liability insurance for teachers is the Association of American Educators. It's not a union. It's a professional association for teachers. Now, we're going to hear from a couple of their representatives here in a moment, but I should note AAE is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Freedom Foundation. We have no commercial business with them or interactions with them. We didn't pay them to participate. They didn't pay us to participate. But we're offering, their information here purely as for informational purposes, because again, this question comes up so often when teachers are trying to figure out whether union membership is right for them, and we get so many questions about liability insurance. We thought it would make sense to hear from again, kind of the biggest source of alternative liability insurance coverage, and that's AAE. So we will hear now from Shanna Morgeson. She's been with AAE since 2009 and currently serves as their membership director. And after Shanna's presentation, we were going to hear also from Lonnie, who has been with AAE since spring of 2020, actually just right before COVID, it sounds like. And she serves as the Director of Policy and Strategic Partnerships. So with that, I will pass it over to Shanna and Lonnie.
Thank you guys so very much for that introduction, and thank you again to the Freedom Foundation for hosting this. And we love being a part of this group that loves shedding light on options for educators. So thank you guys at the Freedom Foundation so very much. And what I would like to do is introduce you to AAE. My name is Shanna Morgeson, and I am the membership team director for AAE, the Association of American Educators. And we have been around for over 26 years, supporting educators nationwide as a non-union choice in a professional association. So I would like to give you an overview of AAE. We call it the 5 Ps, but I'm going to have one that's a little off. I'm going to have a D in there. So it's going to be the 4 Ps and D. But we give this to our members so that they can share with colleagues and not forget anything essential about AAE. It kind of keeps us on track. So without further ado, number 1, P for AAE is our protection. So 99.9% of teachers join a professional association for the protection, which is understandable. With the cell phone, when you're working with children, anything can happen. The unforeseen with this lovely P, the pandemic happened. So every educator who works with children, which of course anyone who works with children, really needs that professional support and having that protection. So ours is a $2 million policy, which is double any other association. And it's a policy written in your name, which is unique. So if you have any additional questions about that, I would love to answer that. And you can also find it on our website at aaeteachers.org. And number 2 is our professionalism. We know educators are professionals. They were the true essential workers this past year. We like to offer professional support so that not only are we helping our professionals, our members, but we're also showing the public at large that this is a profession that needs to be respected, and show that our members truly, to show in the light that these are professionals who spend so much time in preparation for their students and truly care. So bringing the professionalism truly to the forefront of education is what we pride ourselves in doing. Number 3 is our philosophy. We believe that educators need support to best serve students. And other associations, we feel, truly focus a little bit more on the adults, what's best for the adults. Whereas we try to really serve our members so that they can in turn serve their students in the classroom. And the 4th P is politics. We are a 501c6 trade association, meaning we cannot legally take your dues and endorse any political candidate or PAC. We turn it around and give it back to the teachers in the classroom in the form of our scholarship and grant program, which is amazing. And you can find out more about it on our website as well. You don't have to be a member to apply, but we give, I think, more money away than any other association in the country. So check that out. Number 5 is supposed to be a P, but I'm going to change it to a D, which is dues. Our dues are the most affordable of any association you're going to find. And again, I encourage you to look that up. You will see the dues on our website at aateachers.org. And you'll also see all of our other benefits. We have a wonderful advocacy program that some of you may be involved in or would like to be involved in. They do so much in bringing awareness to different policies that affect educators. And we have, again, a professional development program that's great. Many professional programs available to you. A discount program that we affiliated with a few years ago that is wonderful called Ability. It's very similar to Groupon, but you can save you tons of money. And we also have tons of supplementaries you can add. We have dental, we have a wonderful cancer policy, tons of things that you may want to add on. So check out our website. Without further ado, I am going to introduce you to our Director of Strategic Partnerships, Lonnie, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about who we associate with and affiliate with as an association. So thank you again so much. And if you're interested in joining AAE, we would love to have you. So without further ado, Lonnie.
Great. Thanks so much, Shanna. So again, my name is Lonnie Kahapea, and I'm the Director of Policy and Strategic Partnerships for AAE. So I handle all of our federal policy. And unlike other teachers associations, as Shanna mentioned, we will never tell you how to vote or what your opinion should be about a political figure or issue. My mom, she was a teacher for 30 years, and every year she would get a letter in the mail from the Teachers Association telling her who she should vote for, and that's something you will never get from AAE. Though we do still provide information for our teachers. So, for example, in January, we hosted a federal education policy webinar on the American Rescue Plan stimulus bill and how it would affect teachers in classrooms, as well as an update on the Department of Education's policies related to standards and assessment and COVID procedures. So we will still advocate for our members on issues directly to education. So for example, we are advocating for an increase in the educator expense deduction. We know that teachers have always gone above and beyond to provide for their students and their classrooms. And under current law, teachers are able to take up to a $250 deduction on their federal income taxes for money spent on their classroom. However, most teachers, or I should say the average teacher, spends closer to $500 on their classroom every year. And those in high poverty areas spend even more, with principals spending close to $1,000 on their students. And so we are advocating to increase the $250 cap up to $1,000 and to add home internet as a qualifying expense so that you can deduct home internet expenses as well, since a lot of classrooms are still using virtual education as part of their curriculum. Now, in order to illustrate the need of why this would be so important to teachers like yourself, we asked our members to share their stories about how much they spend each year and what they spend it on. And we were overwhelmed by the response. Not only are teachers spending money on classroom supplies, like notebooks, pens, paper, and stuff for specific projects, but in higher poverty areas and even in the not the high poverty areas, they're still spending money on basic necessities for their students, like toothpaste, toothbrushes, deodorant, and food. And so AAE decided that we wanted to help give back, and we are giving 10 teachers up to $600 gift cards to spend on classroom supplies on their upcoming school year. So this is one way that we are advocating for our members on education policy. AAE also has a lot of professional development opportunities for our members. So for example, earlier this year, we hosted a financial literacy course so teachers could better understand their pensions and retirement options. And since pension programs vary by state, we started with Colorado and we plan to bring it to other states. We also have professional development courses on other things like how to teach civics in an election year so that teachers can know what their rights are and what their students' rights are. And then also on media training. And speaking of which, we have a whole advocacy department because we believe that it is vitally important that policymakers hear directly from our teachers on any education policy. So if you're interested, we have PD courses on how to write an op-ed or how you can contact your congressman. And for those who want to get even more involved, we even have a fellows program. AAE also has a discount program on groceries, entertainment, and retail stores, and on supplementary insurance on disability insurance or life insurance. And all of this information is on our website. Finally, we also have a grant program where teachers can win up to $500 in scholarships or grants for classroom expenses or even professional development. So if there's a conference you wanted to go to, you can apply for a scholarship for it. And we do that every spring and fall. So I know that's a lot of information, but all of our benefits are listed on our website. So if you would like more information, we encourage you to visit it. It's aaeteachers.org. And if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat, or you can email us. Our emails are just our first name at aaeteachers.org. So mine is Noelani, NOELANI at aaeteachers.org, or Shanna, my colleague, SHANNA at aaeteachers.org. And if you like what you've heard and you'd like to join now, you can also visit aaeteachers.org/join, and you can join now. Again, our dues are only $16.50 a month, and you can start your $2 million liability insurance and job protection today. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Max.
All right. Well, thank you, Noelani and Shanna, for that presentation. Hopefully that information is helpful to the folks watching and participating. Now, I want to move on to the final segment of our discussion tonight. So far, the discussion is centered around individual options and alternatives to membership in NEA and AFT, and everything we've discussed you can pursue on your own as an individual. But I wanted to close out our discussion tonight with an evaluation of the options that you have collectively as a group of teachers in your workplace when it comes to perhaps different models of workplace representation than the kind of traditional NEA or AFT model of formal collective bargaining. I don't know the culture on the ground in everybody's individual workplaces or states or school districts, but in certain places, just the idea that it's possible to teach in a public school without union representation can be a little bit foreign, but it's absolutely possible. And formal collective bargaining through a formally recognized union is not the only way, or necessarily even the best way, of conducting workplace representation. In some places, teachers have made the decision that union representation simply is not in their interest at all and operate without a union. That process, if you're in a union represented workshop right now and you're interested in just removing the union from your workplace entirely, from your school district entirely, there is a process under your state law to do that. Now, it tends to vary a little bit, the exact details, of course, based on different state laws. But generally, that process looks like getting 30% of the teachers in your district to sign petition cards calling for a union election. And you will submit that to your state labor board. There's usually a particular window period of time near the expiration of your current collective bargaining agreement where you can submit those petition cards. And if you submit enough of these cards, again, over that, usually it's a 30% threshold, then the state labor board will conduct an election for your district, and the teachers will be able to vote on whether to retain the current union or decertify that union entirely and go without that union. That's usually what the process would look like. An interesting example of a non-union district is the Clovis School District in California. It's not a massive district, but it has about 2,100 teachers, public school teachers in that district. And they have never formed a union. Collective bargaining was permitted for teachers in California in 1976. And in this particular district, the teachers have never seen fit to unionize. Although it's not as though the California Teachers Association hasn't tried. There have been multiple efforts to unionize that district over the years, and teachers have rejected it so far each time. Instead of that formal unionization and collective bargaining model, the teachers in the district there have evolved, a faculty senate model of workplace representation, where teachers and school employees are able to express their views and participate in presenting the views of the staff to the administration on workplace matters through this faculty senate. And again, it's an alternative model that's served them well for well over 40 years. And so that's that's a school district of reasonable size, even in the state of California, where I think nearly all other districts of that size have been unionized. So it's not the only way to conduct workplace representation in public schools. Now there's another option that's a little bit less dramatic, and that is basically cutting the ties between your local union and the NEA and the AFT and all of the hierarchy that exists above the local union. A lot of teachers are very satisfied with the workplace representation that they get from their local association, their local teachers union. And it's the statewide union or it's the NEA or AFT headquarters that they are less inclined to support. And so one way to basically, do away with the bad and keep the good is to either disaffiliate from NEA, disaffiliate the local union from the NEA or AFT, and to just decertify the existing union and replace it with an independent or unaffiliated union. And it's basically just two pathways to achieving the same result, which is a local-only organization that is independent, not affiliated with any other union organization, but that retains its formal legal recognition as a union that the district has an obligation to bargain with. Probably the biggest example of a union that's done this is the Clark County Education Association in Nevada. And that consists of about 20,000 teachers in the Las Vegas area. And that's about half the teachers, is my understanding, that's about half the teachers in the state of Nevada. Now, prior to 2018, the Clark County Education Association was affiliated with NEA, and they were paying, large percentages of their dues up to the statewide NEA affiliate in Nevada, and then, of course, to the NEA headquarters in Washington, D.C. But the teachers there voted overwhelmingly in 2019 to disaffiliate from NEA and cut those ties. And that made them the largest independent, non-affiliated teachers union in the country. And as a result, they retained their legal status and as the bargaining representative for those 20,000 teachers, and they continue to negotiate contracts with the schools, public school system there, and continue all the functions of the union. They're just not sending their money out to Washington, D.C. or the statewide affiliate anymore. And as a result of that, they've reduced the annual dues from about $800 down to $500. So that's a pretty attractive proposition for a lot of teachers. Similarly, just in 2019, teachers in the Blue Valley School District in Kansas, that's the fourth largest school district in the state, did the same thing. They disaffiliated from NEA. They continue to exist at the local level. They continue to bargain for, and perform all the functions of a union, but they're saving the money that they would otherwise be sending out of state to support, whatever the agenda of the day happens to be for NEA and AFT. But it doesn't have to be a large effort. It is perfectly possible and legitimate for even very small school districts to go the independent route and cut ties with their national or state affiliates and operate their own functioning, legally recognized union with even just a handful of teachers. Out here in Washington State, there's a small school district over in eastern Washington, rural area, but they decertified. And that's a legal process that navigates through the state labor board. Actually, I should verify that. The difference between disaffiliation and decertification is that a disaffiliation process, you're navigating through whatever process is set up in the NEA or the AFT bylaws and the state affiliates bylaws for disaffiliating. If you decertify, that's a process that is governed by state law and your state labor board. And so sometimes it's a little cleaner or easier just to go through that process instead of trying to play by the NEA's rules. Obviously, they're not going to be happy with local affiliates that want to break off and disaffiliate. So you may have a better shot at navigating that separation by going through a state-regulated process, through administered by a state labor board than you would trying to navigate the internal rules set by NEA or AFT. So this small district out here in Washington State, the Waterville School District, they decertified their Washington Education Association affiliated union back in 2013, and they replaced it with a state-recognized legal union, the Waterville Teachers Leadership Council, which is entirely independent, but it still collects dues, a very high membership rate and participation rate. It still continues to bargain an official collective bargaining agreement with the district. And 8 years in, the teachers there continue to be very happy with the representation that they're able to receive on their own through this independent collective organization that they've created, which functions at very low cost compared to what they were paying before, and allows them to have complete control over the workplace representation that they receive. There's no outside agendas. They are in the driver's seat for handling their interactions with the district. And they continue to be very, very satisfied with the way that works. The president of the Waterville Teachers Leadership Council is a gentleman named Justin Grillo. He's been teaching out in Waterville for quite some time. He couldn't join us this evening, unfortunately, but he's gone on video. He's talked about their experience quite a bit before. And so we're going to play a couple clips of Justin talking about their experience in Waterville and how it's worked out for them to have and form this independent union.
We dissolved the union. We formed our own local leadership council. We pay significantly less. We're in control, and we're very happy with the outcome. We've got to live what we teach. If we're going to tell kids that they need to be personally responsible for themselves, then we need to show that. We need to model that. That was kind of the catalyst that started our journey to becoming an independent organization. Our original idea came about because we were asking the question, why? Why are we part of a larger organization? It's for the contract language and also for legal assistance. We started to just say, can we find a way to do that on our own, independently? And we discovered that we could do that. We wanted to make sure that we could maintain professional relationships within our building and really look for the win-win in any situation. We weren't feeling like that was necessarily what we were getting from being a part of the larger organization. We felt that maybe the union wasn't really concerned about relationships as much as it should have been. And so that's the big difference with our council. We want to build trusting relationships between one another and administration and our students. We wanted to be behind something that we could feel proud of. First off, we had to get an initial vote to say that we wanted to attempt to form our own union. In order to show that you have enough interest, pretty simple. You call a meeting, you hand out cards, and you do a vote. We showed that we had a majority that wanted to go ahead with decertifying. And once we got the approval from PERC, we really began to work on our contract. Being able to take control of our own contract and go through that process, it's a good feeling. It increased the professional relationship that we had amongst ourselves and with administration, and that was the goal. Forming the organization, it took some time, but it wasn't all that difficult. A year later, we are in control of our own professional legal advice, our contract, and we're also able to do things for our community that we weren't able to do before. I'm not anti-union. I'm just for people having their own choice.
Going back the 8 years, so when we started our council, it was kind of an interesting time in our school. We were reworking our mission statement and things like that, and we have a mission statement at our school that says cultivating leaders who thrive with trust, honor, respect, integrity, valor, and involving excellence. And as the group of teachers talked about that, we started to discuss how could we model that for our students. And one of the ways that we thought we could do that is have our own group that took care of the relationship between our administration and our teachers. And before we had WEA, and there was some conflict there that we felt maybe wasn't totally necessary. Just the relationship didn't seem like it was the most important thing. And so we started to discuss that, and we started to talk about, so why are we part of WEA? What do they do for us? And like that has been mentioned, one thing that they do is they provide insurance, liability insurance, and that's a big deal. And also the other thing that that WEA would do for us is they'd help with our contract. And so we started to discuss, is there another alternative? Is there another way to do what's being done? And we found NWPE, and they've been the organization that has helped us with our liability insurance since that time. And then with our contract, it was kind of interesting because as we started to explore that, we found that we could create our own local only. But one thing that was stated to us rather dramatically one day in a meeting was that if we tried to do our own contract, that everything in it would be lost immediately, and which is not true at all. A lot of when you start to, I'm sure many people know this, but when you start to look at, how contracts are set up, they're backed up by state law. And so a lot of things are. And so we said, okay, we worked with NWPE, and then we were connected with a lawyer who helped us out. And we went through the process that Max talked about to just certify. So at this point, so we've set up our own council. We call it WTLC, Waterville Teacher Leadership Council. It is based on building strong relationships with our administrators, with each other, and with our students. And the whole mindset behind our group is that we want a win-win relationship constantly. So we're trying to find the win for our students, the win for our district, and the win for us, and in our conversations. And that's very clear to our administration. We're all on the same page with that. And so whenever we sit down to negotiate anything, that's the mindset where we talk about this needs to be a win for everybody. How can we make it a win for everybody? And that leads to some creative thinking on everyone's part. Our dues are all voluntary, but it's $17 a month for our dues. That money is within our bank account, and so we have complete control over that, all of the money that goes there. We actually haven't had to touch much of it, which is great. We budget it, so we have a certain amount that is, if we need legal counsel. We have another set that is for scholarships for our students, because we wanted to be sure to keep giving to our students. We have another part of our budget that is for our relationships. So, if our secretary retired, so we took money from there to buy her a nice basket with wine and cheese and all those kind of things. And we have we have also within that, we have a professional dinner that we put on. Everyone's invited. The members of our group get to take their spouse and them for free, but anybody else can go for like $15. And we encourage everybody to show up to that, because it is about the relationships, and we're trying to build those relationships. And we know if our relationships are strong between the teachers and the administration, that helps our students, which is the most important part. We also have, we've set up monthly meetings with the administration just to sit down and chat about how things are going. Is there anything that we might need to know about, or anything that we could, on the teacher side, that maybe we're hearing something that's bothering somebody, and maybe there's a way to fix that before it turns into a major problem. Because again, we're just about maintaining the relationships. I guess in closing, it's been an awesome opportunity for us. It continues to work. We're in complete control of what happens with us, and it's been a good experience.
All right. Well, that brings us toward the end of our program for this evening. Before we wrap things up entirely, we do want to answer a few questions that we've been getting here through the chat as best as we can. I know our staff are working on that in real time here, but we wanted to take a few questions and take the opportunity to answer those, for the benefit of the group here. So we'll give our folks a second to scan through those and see which ones maybe we can tackle here for everybody.
It looks like I have one for AAE here. Can you talk a little bit more about your liability insurance policy and how it compares to others? Yeah, this is a great question. So AAE's liability insurance policy is a $2 million policy. Again, it's in your name and it starts on your first day of membership. For other teachers associations, I believe typically they're not in your name, the liability insurance policy, and so they can decide whether or not to allow access to that policy. But with AAE's policy, since it's in your name, approval is never needed. In addition, again, our policy is up to $2 million, whereas I believe one of the other teachers associations, their policy only insures up to $1 million. In fact, we have a lot more information about this on our website, and we even have a comparison of our policy with the other policies that are out there. And so I encourage you to visit our website, aaeteachers.org, to check it out.
Thanks, Noah, Lonnie. Those were all good points. And again, we get a lot of questions about liability insurance, so that's a good one to pay attention to. I've got one here that I wanted to cover. What do I do if the union refuses to cancel my membership or stop withholding union dues from my wages? As I mentioned before, you have a constitutional right to avoid union dues payment. Now, some unions out there, some teachers' unions have tried to make it very difficult for employees to cancel their dues deductions. Maybe they say you can only opt out during a particular period of time each year, or maybe they say you've got to go down to the union office and sign a dues cancellation form in person. If you run into a situation like that, reach out to the Freedom Foundation. Odds are there's some problem with that arrangement that our attorneys may be able to help with. We do have legal staff in-house. And we assist public employees on a regular basis in navigating these issues and getting their dues deductions stopped successfully. So if you run into issues like that, just reach out to us. We will do the very best we can to get back to you quickly and see if we can resolve that in a way that works for you.
It looks like I have another one here we can answer. Are there other teachers in my area that have left the union and joined AAE? I'm worried I'll be judged for leaving. Okay, this is another good question. AAE has tens of thousands of members throughout the country and in all 50 states. So it's very likely that we have members in your area. And I will say that I know sometimes it seems like you're getting a lot of pressure from your colleagues to stay in the union. However, there is recent survey data that shows that over 90% of teachers respect the rights of their colleagues to choose their own teachers association and make the decision of what teachers association they'd like to belong to. So even though it seems like your colleagues won't support you, this information shows that teachers do support their colleagues in making this decision. And we have other teachers who have gone before you. You're not alone. There are tens of thousands of teachers out there who've done the same thing that you have. And so I encourage you to really do your research and get as much information as you can so that you can make the decision that is best for you.
Thanks, Noah, Lonnie. That's another good point. Again, and also another question that we get quite a bit. This issue of peer pressure. But one other thing that I would point out, just to keep in mind, the Janus versus AFSCME decision was decided 3 years ago now, and maybe people in your workplace probably aren't advertising the fact that they aren't union members anymore, that they resign. But 3 years in, the odds are you're not the first one, or you won't be the first one if you decide to resign your membership now. This is probably something the unions had to deal with already. It's probably something the districts had to deal with already. So whether you know it or not, odds are there are other people in your workplace, in your school, in your building, in your district that have already gone down this path successfully. Something just to keep in mind.
Looks like we have a good one here for AAE. What has AAE done to help teachers through COVID? Okay, yeah, that's a great question. Once the COVID pandemic started happening, we realized that we really needed to help support our educators through this. And so we started off by creating a list of resources for our members. So a lot of online resources that they could use to help teach, like Moby Max and other math programs and reading programs that they could access online to help supplement during distance learning. We also started to host professional development courses and training programs on how to use Zoom, best practices and tips for distance learning. And we also hosted a lot of Zoom sessions for educators who just wanted to meet with other teachers and see kind of how they were approaching distance learning. And so we reorganized that. We also had a special scholarships and grant program specifically for COVID relief. So I mentioned the one that happened every spring and fall. We had special ones for COVID, and we actually expanded it because the need was there. And so we've done what we can to help support our educators. We even we've done surveys on how they felt about reopening and about going back into the classroom and about distance learning itself and what kind of support they needed from us and from their administration. And so these are just some of the ways that we've helped to support our educators through COVID.
All right, folks, I think that is about all that we are going to have the time for today. We do very much appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join with us for the webinar tonight. Hopefully you found the information useful. Maybe it's got you thinking a little bit more about some of these issues. Sometimes it just takes a while. We put these things on our to-do list, and it just takes a little while to dig into them and figure out, what's going on, do the research that we need to do to make decisions like this. So hopefully this information has been useful to you. Please feel free to reach out to us if you do have follow-up questions. We've done the best we can to cover a lot of material tonight, but, again, state laws vary, union practices vary, so we just can't, we can't cover everything, in the course of, 45 minutes or an hour. So if you want more information or would like to follow up with us directly, please feel free to do so. I would direct you to, again, that website, optouttoday.com, OPTOUT today.com. There's a contact us form that you can use there. We monitor that regularly and get back to folks as quickly as we can. You can also feel free to give us a call if you prefer to chat with us over the phone. You can reach us at 1-833-228-4969. That's 1-833-228-4969. Thanks again for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening.